Hello and welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute-a-day podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse, recorded here in the dining room of the Bible Bistro, located in Sharonville, Ohio. Hey there, friend. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. We come today to verses 4 and 5 in Psalm 99, and so if you have your Bible, as you come in here, sit down at the table with me, open your Bible up. Now, if you don't have your Bible, if you're in your car or you're somewhere where you don't have one, then let me read for us. We'll read these two verses. We're going to read 4 and 5. And remember now, we're talking about the holiness of God. This is sort of the theme, the main thread throughout Psalm 99 is all about God's holiness. Now, this psalm fits into the larger, piece that is Psalm 95 through 101, which is worshiping God. It's these worship psalms that we have in just these few verses. But this one is all about God's holiness. And we're going to see that again here in 4 and 5. We saw it yesterday when we talked about the name of God. It's great and terrible. It's holy. So now we're going to see something else here, 4 and 5. Let me read those for us. The king's strength also loves judgment. You do establish equity. You execute judgment and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt ye the Lord our God, and worship at his footstool, for he is holy. Seems like there ought to be the Selah right there, doesn't it? Well, so the king's strength loves justice, or judgment. And then suddenly, what do we have? He switches. He switches to you. You do establish. You execute judgment. See? So he turns from his audience. Basically he's been speaking to his audience. The Lord reigns. The Lord is great. Let them praise thy great and terrible name. Right there he turns to the Lord. Let them, because he's been speaking about the Lord. Then he turns to the Lord. Let them praise thy great and terrible name, for it is holy. Or just generally to the audience worldwide he turns. And then he's again speaking, the king's strength loves judgment, a statement that's true. The kings do love judgment. They love to have things ordered in a certain way. But then he turns to the Lord. You establish equity. You execute judgment and righteousness in Jacob. So while he's saying that the Lord, or that the king loves judgment, the king's strength loves judgment. And of course, we're talking about the Lord reigning. So this is something that would be true of men. It's also true of the Lord. But then he turns to the Lord and he says, you establish equity. So while the kings love judgment, they love things to be ordered right. Only the Lord can establish equity. Now, there's a whole lot of talk these days about what is equitable. And men are trying to say that they can decide what's equitable for me and for you and for themselves. But there's only one person that can establish equity, and that's the Lord. He's the only one who can say, this is right for you and this is right for him. Only the Lord can do that because he's holy. You see, his holiness, which he mentions here in verse 5, for he is holy. His holiness is the thing that allows him to establish equity. Only he can do it. If you allow men to do it, or some system to do it, or some philosophy to do it, it will fail every time. Men cannot establish equity because men are not holy. Only God can, because only he is. He executes judgment and righteousness in Jacob. While the king loves judgment, it is the Lord that executes judgment. He executes judgment and righteousness in Jacob. Why? Because he's the king. And then we have this exhortation here. Exalt the Lord our God. Now, this happens twice in this psalm. Once here in 5, and once then again in 9. So these are concluding statements. So he's concluding now the first 5 verses with this statement, Exalt ye the Lord our God, and worship at his footstool, for he is holy. And then notice how it is written in 9. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at his holy hill, for the Lord our God is holy. Pretty much the same thing. Slightly different, but pretty much the same thing. So we have this concluding statement, which is an exhortation to come and worship because he is holy. So worship, our expression of worship, is a manifestation of our recognition that God is holy. And only a holy God can execute judgment and justice and equity. He's the only one. So his holiness then is being described by these things that he does. All right, join me again tomorrow and we're going to look at verses 6 and 7 here on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. For more fresh and delicious Bible studies, podcasts, books, and more, check out the Bible Bistro online and on YouTube. Join me again next time for Daily Dose Radio.